Um, we will wait for 1 more minute for others to join us. But very nice to see some familiar faces from our Tuesday session. I see Soraya, Veronica, Maribel. Hello, colleagues, and hello to the newcomers as well. Please feel free to introduce yourself through the chat box. You can type your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from today. So I suggest we start. I will reintroduce myself. My name is Alexandra Atalla, and I'm here on behalf of UNDP's Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems Community, known as the FACS community. And today is our second session of our workshop, which will uncover how understanding our own cognitive processes can help us engage more skillfully with change and uncertainty. This workshop will be delivered and facilitated by Ben Elers. Ben is the founder of the Brain Innovation Project and has been working with UNDP Food Systems team for a couple of years now, delivering different types of workshops around resilience, innovation, this time uncertainty, and also offering one-to-one coaching sessions. So I will leave it to Ben to introduce again the workshop, but also recap a bit the first module for those of you who are joining us for the first time. And we will also be sharing after the session the recordings. So if anyone would like, to watch module 1, you will be able to do it later on. So thank you again for joining us, and over to you, Ben.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Nice to see some familiar faces and that you weren't all chased off. Um, anyway, so for those of you who joined the session on Tuesday, this is a little bit more experiential and practical. This not practical, but it's a little bit more. We're going to be doing quite a lot of exercises and tools and ways of actually thinking about how we engage with uncertainty, rather than the more sort of like brain aspects. Although we come into that. But we also won't just be doing tools and techniques, because for me, it's important that we don't just do sort of like tools and techniques and try them out, but we actually try to explore what's happening with these tools and techniques and why they work, or why they make us think differently, and in this case, engage with uncertainty differently. Okay. And as I said yesterday, please just jump in at any time if there are any questions, comments. It's just a free space, and everybody should feel comfortable, and we don't need to be, overly formal about any of this. Yeah. Um, any comments or reactions just before we start? Any comments or reactions or questions just arising from Tuesday's session? Any thoughts? Doesn't matter if you don't have any. That's okay. No. Okay. Good. So just what we're going to be doing today. So in the first session, right, we talked about um, uncertainty is a real key way in which we make sense of the world. And today we're going to be focusing on staying resourceful. And although we talked about big topics, the interventions that I'm going to be suggesting today are actually quite small, but hopefully you'll see can be phenomenally effective, right, in terms of how we respond to uncertainty. They're not, there's kind of like little tweaks in terms of the way we're thinking and seeing things, which can have a big impact. So, so this is what we're essentially saying that with uncertainty, as there's that this is a highly simplistic framework, right? We've got 4 hours altogether, which is like a morning or an afternoon, to talk about a massive topic. But essentially, in a very simplistic way, there's two main ways of thinking or reacting to uncertainty. When it's something which is remember, there's no learning or action without uncertainty, without prediction errors. And so this can be something which is a nutrient for us, or it can be something where it's a poison for us, where we become overwhelmed by the uncertainty. And remember, we talked about uncertainty is always a relationship with a situation. It's not the situation itself. Now, just one important point of clarification here. I'm not saying for 1 second that in extreme situations where people are in war zones or in famines or in desperate situations that they just need to kind of like think differently and everything's fine. I'm not saying that at all, right? I'm saying that most of us, fortunately, the people in this room, we're in a situation where we do have choices generally about how we respond to things. Okay. Sometimes more, sometimes less. So just briefly, this was kind of a summary of what we talked about yesterday. It's all a dance between the internal, your models of the world, and the external world, right? What's going on out there. And in terms of our brains are locked away in our skulls, right? They don't have direct access to the world. So they depend on sensory signals, a sight, touch, etc., to know what's going on in the outside world. And they also depend on sensory signals to know what's going on inside your world, right? Inside your body. And they act on the outside world and they act on the inside world. They act on the outside world in terms of finding resources, how they respond to uncertainty externally, but internally, your blood pressure, heart rate, your insulin levels, all of this stuff goes through your brain, right? And it's very few. There's even our immune system is connected with our brains. We're understanding more. So your brain, we'll get to it in a bit. There are some parts which work without your brain, but your brain acts within your body as well to maintain that. And the basic operating principle is reduction of uncertainty or surprise. And so just one more thing. And while we're talking about brains here, the important thing about the work of Carl Friston, which all this is based on, is this is entirely scalable from brains to organizations, to teams, to societies, right? It's saying that basically societies as well operate to minimize their uncertainty or surprise between their pre-existing model of the world and the world itself, and teams, right? So we're focusing here on brains, but we could also be doing this workshop with teams. Right? So It's about the uncertainty or surprise. So we're searching for certainty, but it's an ambiguous world out there, right? It's like, yeah, it's ambiguous out there in terms of, you can see if you stare at this, this thing here with the steps. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, right? I mean, just try staring at these for 10 seconds, and 99% of people, they can't hold it. The steps will switch, right? It's because your brain, it's not just about what you're conscious of, but your brain is constantly seeking certainty to understand what's going on in the outside world, right? Also, internally, your heart beats faster whether you're in love or you're faced with fear, right? Excitement and anger are very similar physiological responses inside. And so your brain is also, it has to deal with ambiguous internal signals from your body. Right? And it's having to build up this picture of the world and to try to figure out what's going on in order to be able to act and keep you alive. Right? And if anybody's interested in this about the I think just one thing, if anybody's interested in this, the understanding of emotions is very much in our current understanding is very much about it, our emotions are this interplay between our bodily functions, whether our heart's going fast, etc., and the external world and the meaning we give to them. And I know a lot of people are interested in understanding emotions more. And this book here by Lisa Feldman Barrett, maybe some of you have read this or are familiar with it already, is it's kind of state of the art in terms of the whole thing of predictive brain and emotions. Right? It's just it's something which is it's really interesting. Essentially, it's saying that emotions are really constructed and learned much more than we think, right? And they're very important, but not as fundamental in the way we think of it. We will be getting to exercises in a minute, but I'm just trying to recap a little bit where we could. So we've got this ambiguous. We're basically we have this dynamic world model. It's an ambiguous world, and the big thing is how we're surfing this uncertainty, right? We can't make sense of everything intellectually and think everything. We're kind of surfing. It's there's a skill here, right? Staying on top of the wave and not falling off and drowning. Right? Critically, this how we react to context. How we react is context specific. So it's the right model. Our models are not one fixed models, just our memories. They're dynamic, which are continuously updating and making sense and coming up with novel solutions in a situation. So if you're surfing, you don't want to be thinking about doing your travel expense report, right? You need to be bringing the right model as to how the world works and yourself in the model to the situation you're in. So you need the right model, and you need the right feedback from the world, right? If you're trying to desperately stay on top of the wave, you don't want to be looking at the I don't know the looking at somebody eating an ice cream on the beach. I don't know, whatever, right? You need to be getting the right feedback from the world for your situation, because this is where all the uncertainty is, this balance. But here, right state, this is what we're mainly focusing on today, right? And what do we mean by this? It's essentially this. It's a state. It's an overall state that we're in. It's not an intellectual thing, it's a state. Right? And that is what we're going to be focusing on. Right? And it's not about positive thinking. It's about being in a resourceful state for the situation. So, in other words, being in a resourceful state as to how as to how we respond to uncertainty. Any questions so far? Does that make sense vaguely? Um, yeah, any comments, questions? No? Anybody who is able to turn their cameras on, I can see Alexandra, Veronica, and Simon or Simon. Anybody else who's willing to show up, um, it's great. It really does help in terms of the dynamics. For I think for other participants, they feel that there's other people here. But I do realise that some of you, you know, you're having to do other things at the same time, and I'm very glad you're here, even if you have to do other things. And Maribel, can you turn your camera off? I can see you're like driving. It's like we don't want to, like, I mean that's commitment for you. But please, 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 right? Um, anyway, state. If at this moment you're thinking, what the hell is state? We're going to do an exercise which will demonstrate to you what state is. And you get to experience what state is. You remember walking the plank, you know, about that with pirates? You know, they would get you to walk a plank of wood, or not, you know, me, but, you know, and that was certainly a state of uncertainty, right, which was created. They had to walk along the plank and fall off into the sea for a pretty nasty death, all right? Walking the plank. And we're going to do an exercise of walking the plank, okay? And everybody's going to do this exercise apart from Mary Bell, who unless you stop your car, you really shouldn't be doing this, all right? Because this exercise is going to be done with eyes closed, okay? And the reason that it's done with eyes closed, it is just it's not any funny stuff. It's just we're such visual creatures as humans, and by closing your eyes, you're just taking some of the all this data coming from outside, and it just becomes it's easier to focus. So, and I know that some people, when they close their eyes, they prefer to have their cameras off, right? And so I do understand if even those of you who are nice enough to have your cameras on at the moment, if you want to turn your cameras off, then please feel free, because some people feel a bit uncomfortable with their eyes closed and their cameras on. Others, like me, don't really care, right? Anyway, so we're going to be doing this exercise, and it will take 3 or 4 minutes. Right? And I would just ask you just to close your eyes, and I'll let you know when you open them. It'll be in about 3 or 4 minutes. And so just keep your eyes closed for this exercise. Sit back, get comfortable, relax. All right. Just take a bit of time just to bring your thoughts onto this. And it's going to be an exercise of imagination. And I don't want you to worry about, are you doing it correctly? Am I hearing exactly what Ben is saying? Doesn't matter. Just do it however it works for you, and that's fine. All right? Just it will be fine. We saw a plank of wood. It's this long piece of wood. And I would just like you to imagine that in the room where you're sitting, there's a plank of wood. And it's lying on the floor. But it's lifted a little bit at either end by some bricks. So it's just a bit off the floor. And I would like you to imagine walking across the room and stepping onto that plank of wood and walking along it. Just do that. Walking along that plank of wood. And now I'd like you to imagine that you're on top of a huge, high skyscraper, maybe in New York or somewhere, a massive skyscraper. And joining your skyscraper with the neighboring skyscraper is a plank of wood. And I want you just to imagine walking across that. Don't look down. It's awfully high up there. Don't worry too much about that wind. But if you find that difficult, don't worry because help is at hand. Standing next to you is Superman or Wonder Woman. And I want you just to pull them into your body. And as you pull Superman or Wonder Woman into your body, you don't need to cross this plank of wood walking across it. You can run and jump over to the neighboring skyscraper. And running across that skyscraper and jumping over to the next one. And running across the skyline, enjoying your new superpowers, doing flips, flying, somersaults. And come back to that initial skyscraper and walk across that plank of wood and notice how different it is. And now you can open your eyes and come back. What happened? Nothing. Could you do it? How was it different? The two planks of wood. Please just jump in. Please jump in.
Interesting as when you change the frame, the rules of the game in a sense. If you walk on the one that is just on the bricks, you do it easily. You picture yourself between the two buildings, and then the fear of heights and the uncertainty and is emerging. And as you know that it's no longer a problem, all of that disappears. All the mental pressure that would come with it, which makes for a useful type of reframing in other situations as well.
Right. So when you take in Superman or Wonder Woman, it changes, huh? Anybody else?
Yeah, I think definitely when Wonder Woman kicks in, um, it's even fun, like to make, I don't know, twist, and I don't know, the imagination and creativity also started to felt just free to go anywhere, do whatever you want.
Right. And when you were walking across the plank initially, across the high one, did you, well, lots of people when they do this, they actually feel it in their body. They feel physically, or they start sweating, or they feel tense. Right? Did anybody have that?
Yes, I had. When I was not Superman, I was picturing me with a lot of difficulties crossing and being very scared. I couldn't walk actually. I was kind of I don't know what's the English word when you scroll or something like that.
Crawl. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. When you crawl. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. This is just from the pictures in our mind. Right? It's nuts. Right? And I'm not suggesting that you all walk around and think of yourself as Superman or Wonder Woman your whole life. Why not? If that's what gets you going. right? It's not the point about positive thinking, right? It's not just to think, oh, I'm Wonder Woman or Superman. It's about that your thoughts and your imagination fundamentally, not just a little bit, fundamentally change your relationship to the situation, right? Nothing about the situation changed in terms of that high plank. It was purely your relationship to that situation which changed, right? And this is so important. And this was not purely a psychological change, it's a physical change as well. It's because the two things are so interlinked, right? And this is what we mean by a state change, right? It's the total configuration of your physiology and your psychology coming together is a state change, right? It's the whole thing. Right? And what we're after here is not just intellectual answers, but what we're after here is exploring how we can change our states and modify our states, because this is key to this surfing uncertainty, is the state we're in. All right? And it's a little bit more sophisticated, and there's a little bit more nuance and options available than just whether you're Superman or Wonder Woman. And we're going to be sort of exploring this a little bit more, carrying on. Does this make sense so far? Okay. Good. There was one other thing I wanted to say, which has totally slipped my mind. That's okay. Oh yeah, and also teams and countries are also in states. All right. I mean, you, for those of you who work in a team, it's not just an individual thing, but it's like you feel it in a team when a team is in a certain not just a frame of mind, but how it's all interacting. It really makes a difference to the options which are available. All right. So moving on with this. So that was state change. But we want to go a bit deeper on this because I don't this whole thing that we're talking about here, it's not supposed to be mystical or esoteric here, right? This here, I know we all have different belief systems and whatever, but this here is very much it's very much based on natural, biological presence, right? The biological way of thinking here. You don't need any belief systems for this. This is the way we work. And we're always in a state. So I should have said this before, always, all right? At any moment, you're in a state at the moment, right? Even if you're not aware of it, we're continuously, and these are sometimes, there's fear, there's happiness, there's joy, there's sleeping, there's love, but it's always a total configuration, right, within a state. And managing our state, I would say, is key, not just to how we interact with uncertainty, kind of pretty much everything in life. Right? I think it's kind of the leverage point. Doesn't mean it's always easy, and it's not that we can just have a 2-hour workshop and we've cracked it, right? It's not saying that, but this is to explore some of the possibilities, right? And there's many types of states, but there's essentially two variations, two sort of like axes. There's high-low, called arousal, and then there's pleasant v unpleasant, which is in the the neuroscience valence, right? So here you've got anger, joy, right? Excitement, whatever, right? High motivation, high arousal, but negative, anger, but you act, right? Joy, high arousal, yeah, I want to do something, and it's positive. Negative, This is what we talked about, the freezing yesterday, right? And the you know, the downtime, whether you meditate, you're sleeping, you're resting, reading a book, whatever, right? It's more of a low arousal. And really important is this is contextual. Because are there any of these states which are not which are best avoided? Is there any of these states which you should really avoid? Any suggestions or thoughts?
Well, maybe it's just overall good to avoid negative.
To avoid negative, right? Although anger can be a very, very, very important motivator, right? And this is one of the things in elections, right? A good politician knows that, right? You either have to get people excited or angry, right? But you need them one or the other. You need a higher arousal state. I would agree with you, Norma, right? You essentially you're looking to be in a positive thing generally, at least for your own health, right? But anger can be important, right? I mean, it's not that it's a bad. The worst one, as far as I'm aware, is this.
Mm.
That's when you're freezing. You've lost your agency, right? Life is shit and you can't do anything about it. All right. I mean, that's the worst thing of all. All right. And so, of all of these things, I think different contexts they're useful, but that's one maybe there are times when it is useful. Maybe we need to sometimes just have a reset or whatever. But generally, that's the freeze. That remember we talked about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn on Tuesday. That's kind of that, right? And an uncertainty, that's not a good place to be. But anyway, in terms of states, one of the things that is creating a lot of uncertainty these days is artificial intelligence. What does it mean to be human, right? Where are we going? What is artificial intelligence taking over? All sorts of questions that people have about, very important questions. But I want to explore our natural intelligence because that, at least for now, is our human comparative advantage, right? I don't know if it still will be in 50 years or 100 years, but this is where we are now. We're flesh and blood, humans, not machines. So let's work with what we've got, and in terms of uncertainty. Do any of you remember? Are any of you any good at maths? Do you remember this from school? We used to have like a little cannon always. It was like you'd have a cannon firing a ball, and you'd have to calculate if it was fired at this angle and at this speed, this is how far it would go, etc., etc. Do you remember that? Any of you have those kind of things at school? Yeah. Anybody good at this? Yeah, maybe a little bit of, you might need some refresher and possibly do it or whatever. Imagine, so some of you maybe could calculate the trajectory of a ball. If I threw a ball, you could calculate that with a bit of with a bit of revision. Now, you may or may not be able to, we all kind of in awe of people who can sit there and do the maths and it all makes sense. Well, wow, isn't this genius, all right, that they can do all this? It seems like a mystery to the rest of us. And yet, if I threw a ball, you might not be able to do the maths, but you could do something else. You, through, I don't know what, doing something, you can move your body, run, put your arms out, adjust for wind speed, and clasp your hands together and catch the ball. All right. Which is more impressive, being able to calculate the trajectory or being able to catch the ball? What do you think?
I think catching the ball is more difficult.
Anybody else?
If you if you look at from a technical perspective with machine learning and artificial intelligence, one of the tests that is ongoing at the moment if a robot is able to load a dishwasher, which seems completely simple for us, but if you need to calculate all the trajectories, the strength, the angles, and everything, it's something that we're just not there yet, and for us it seems completely simple.
Our ability to catch the ball is infinitely more impressive. Infinitely. I mean, it's just in a different dimension of ability as to what it is to be alive and to be a human with flesh and blood kind of like reactions and flesh and blood abilities to exist in the world. And yet we so often think of ourselves just in terms of our identity. You know, my name is Veronica, right? I have this job or I don't, and I have this family or I don't, or whatever, and I like football, but I don't like swimming, and we think of ourselves so much in terms of this identity, even though we know we shouldn't, right? We forget the fact there's a lot of other stuff going on, right? Let's think of some other things that you can do, but you don't know how you can do it. So you don't really know how you can catch that ball, as Simon said, or Simon said, you can, all of this stuff with AI, it still can't load a dishwasher. Although, actually, anyway, there's different approaches.
It starts, but it's a test.
Yeah. What else can you do that you don't know how you do it? Well, you can you can remember for your heart to beat a few 100 billion times throughout your life. Do you know how you do that? I mean, you kind of might be able to describe it from a biological perspective and sort of like look at the system, but you don't really have access to how you do that consciously. Breathing. How do you remember to breathe a few 100 billion times? Do you know how you do that? But you can. What about growing your toenails? That's quite impressive. Like moving around atoms and extending forms in your body. That's kind of impressive stuff. Do you know how you do that? No clue, but you can do it. What about ingesting food? Right? I hope most of you had breakfast this morning. Right? You ingest food and you get energy from food and you manage to turn that food into thoughts and conversations. You need energy for your brain to work. It takes up 20% of your energy. You can convert complex thoughts and ideas into movements of your body, of breathing, your mouth shape, your tongue, and communicate to other people. It's pretty amazing stuff, huh? Right? You can do that. Do you know how you do that? But you can. Right? All I'm trying to say here is, well, not all I'm trying to say, is your biology, your biological you is so much infinitely more impressive than what we can do with machines and all of this other stuff. So what, at least for now, and so what I'm going to say is that in these exercises, when we talk about you, and this is a really important point here, it's really important. is we're not talking about you, the identity, but we're talking about you, the living organism, everything within the boundaries of your skin. All right? The whole thing all put together. So if I refer to you as the living organism later, don't be offended, right? It's meant as a compliment to your brilliance, not as a sort of like, you know, just bringing you down, okay? But think of yourself as a living organism, you the living organism, not just you the identity, right? Is there any comments or questions about that? But it's a critical part of this puzzle where we're going, right? Right?
Every
Sorry?
every form of life can do this without thinking how. It's the intrinsic, you know, thing for whatever lives.
Yeah. And yet we forget it.
Yeah, but imagine if we have to think about it on the top of all the other things that we are thinking, so that doesn't leave any space for doing anything else. So if you have to be aware all the time that you're breathing, you're digesting, it's a little bit.
Well, this is I'm very glad you brought this up, because this is the whole point about surfing it. Right? Is you're not thinking about it. You're kind of riding it. Right? You're kind of and this is where we're going with this a little bit, is about how you don't have to almost be consciously aware of it, but you're just kind of like living from within it. And I think that one of the things is you hear about people being stressed and anxious and whatever, and you know, negative thinking. I'm not surprised if you're like ignoring 98% of who you are, right? That people get caught in their heads. But we will go there, Veronica, and I hope what we can do is a couple of techniques to address exactly what you're saying. All right. I love it when people sort of like say things which kind of anticipate exactly what's coming, right? So that then is helpful. So you, the living organism, and this is moving on to exactly this, right? And to building on Veronica's point. If you think about it, what we've talked about with the uncertainty is our brains are constantly asking, essentially, questions of the world. What is this? What does it mean to me? How does this relate to my model of the world? Right? We can reframe uncertainty of your brain is by trying to get certainty. It's asking questions of the world. Right? And we spend a lot of time asking why. And I think it was his name, Simon Sinek, or whatever. Is that his name? I don't know. He says, always start with why. I'm not quite so sure that's a good idea. All right. He means a different type of why, but that's okay. This is a really important thing, is thinking of your brain and your model as the internet, in a sense, right? Or your whole body, right? Including the breathing, your whole intelligence. And you're constantly asking it to do questions. You're constantly asking it questions. And if you ask, what can I do to, it will change the answers you get. So, for example, if I ask the question, why am I so bad at French? All right. My brain will it will answer the question that it's asked. Because you're lazy, because you're worried about making mistakes, because you didn't work hard at school, because you prefer to go out with your mates rather than studying, that you're thick, right? You're stupid, because that's the question that I've asked. All right. If I'm asking my brain the question of what can I do to become better at French, it fundamentally shifts the answers that my brain can come up with. right? Because I'm asking my brain or I'm asking my system a different question. So I'm asking, what can I do to become better at French? It's already reframed. It's already reframed the question into A, this means the situation can change, right? Because if I'm asking why am I bad at French, I'm assuming that it's a fixed situation. I'm now already giving myself the suggestion that this situation can change. And I'm also putting my agency, what can I do to, into the picture, right? And so one of the key things that I would suggest is, well, do any of you ask why am I bad at French, or why is the world a horrible place, or why whatever? Do people do that? And the question is, you're probably looking. Sorry, it's Julian. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say yes, of course.
Right. And that's fine, but are you? And we'll come to it in a second. You ask these questions, but they're not always very empowering. The answers, they're not always very helpful, because first of all, it assumes there's a clear cause and effect, and there just isn't in this uncertain world, right? There isn't always this clear cause and effect. So asking this framing stuff is in what can I do is really, really, really important for finding agency in terms of uncertainty and not feeling overwhelmed. Okay. Any comments on that?
I was just going to say that when you ask the question why, then it's often so overwhelming that you think I cannot do anything. I mean,
Right.
it's brings you to this situation when you're frozen, and then you just say,
Right.
okay, I'm not going
Right.
further.
Right. Because it doesn't it takes you out of the situation. There's, it's you're asking to describe a situation, and there may not be a cause and effect. Why is there war in Ukraine and Russia? I don't know. Is it territory? Is it human nature? Is it? Well, I mean, how far do you want to go back? All right. Is it power? This obsession we have with looking for a cause, right? When often causes are, some people would say it's about they have religious beliefs on it. I mean, there's so many different kind of levels of it, and what can I do? But here is the very interesting twist, right, on this whole thing, asking what can I do, right? And this is kind of an important one, right? So you're basically, the questions you ask yourself are really important as to how you respond to uncertainty. But okay, do I do this? Yeah, we always want to make certain. We always want to make certain of the world, right? Remember, in terms of our brains are constantly searching for certainty, right? We've talked about this, trying to reduce uncertainty. What that means is it's trying to, when you come up with certainty and you say this is the answer, then by definition you're saying everything else is not the answer, right? And it's not a bad thing. We need that for decision making. But there's a very big downside to this. And this is called resistance to premature closure. Because whenever we ask a question like, what's 2 plus 2? It's 4, right? We've already said, well, it's nothing else, right? We've closed it. Our brains are no longer working on it. But the world is a little bit more ambiguous than this. How many colors in a rainbow? Well, the answer's there, 7, yeah? Are there? Well, in terms of before Newton came along, we used to think that there were 5 colours in a rainbow. But Newton did his prisms, right? And did light into 7, right? Or 7 distinguishable things. And Newton was a religious guy, and there were 7 is a, many cultures and many religions, 7 is a kind of like a religious number, right? It's an important number. Now we see 7, right? And actually, how many colors are there in the rainbow? 5 or 7? Well, there's none, right? I mean, it's a continuous spectrum, right, of light. All I'm trying to say here is that even things which seem so physical for us, right, and so clear have these answers, a lot of these things are constructs by our more analytical wanting to divide everything into parts, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's allowed for enormous progress, right? But just to be aware of it, even things which seem so simple. Colors, right? We have different numbers of receptors. So humans would see something like this. This is what a bird sees. A bird sees many more, right? Colors, many more detail. Dogs have 2 receptors. We have 3. So this is how we see color. This is how a dog would see color, right? So even things which we think of as so fundamental about the world, there still are models, right? It's an interplay of ourselves. What does this mean? Right? So where are we going with this? And remember, we don't like unfinished business. We like uncertainty. We like certainty. We like to finish the crossword, finish the book, right? We don't like cliffhangers in movies, right? On TV. We have to come back the next week to watch it. We don't like this uncertainty, right? And it's all because of our brains, right? But even though it's our natural way of doing things, it's kind of important. I want to talk about the Zeigarnik effect. Has anybody heard of the Zeigarnik effect? Do you know this? It's very, very powerful, this, right? Bluma Zeigarnik, she was a psychologist actually in Berlin, where I live, in 1910, I think. And she used to go out on a Friday night after the week's work with her colleagues to a beer garden. It's a big thing here in Germany. And they would all order their food and drinks, and you'd have your beers and the colas, and somebody would have their bratwurst, their sausage with onions, others not. Some people would want their salad with cucumbers, and others not, or whatever. It's complicated when there's a big group of people, as you know. And they used to have this, waiter, the same one every week, who always remembered the order without writing it down. And because they were psychologists, they were like, what's going on here? How does this work? So they decided they'd do an experiment. And one time after he gave the food, they put napkins over their plates to cover the food as soon as he'd done it. So, excuse me, sir, can you come back and tell us what we had? And he was like, nope. Right? No idea. And they were like, but you've just given us the food like 2 minutes ago. What do you mean you have no idea? And he was like, I don't know. Why might that be? Why would he not remember? Any thoughts?
When the job is done, we forget.
We don't need the information. Exactly. Right? We've closed the loop, right? It's like when you revise for an exam at school or something, you know, you revise, you revise, you revise, you revise, you've done it. You don't need it. It's gone because your brain has closed it. It's finished with this task. It's certain now, right? It's closed that uncertainty if you've still got a test. The waiter had closed the uncertainty of delivering the meal, right? And so the brain has found its answer and it no longer needs it, right? Remember, that's what it's trying to do. But here's the thing, right? If you, and here's the thing, if any of you had the experience of you're trying to remember the name of somebody that you've met at a party or something, and you can't remember it, and then 3 days later, you know, you're putting your socks in the washing machine or something, and it's, it was Soraya. Yeah. Have you ever had that? Why is it? Because your brain was still working on it, right? Because you hadn't closed the loop. It was still uncertainty for your brain, right? And it was still trying to work on it. And it's working on it often in the background, right? And this is a really powerful tool to use, right? If you keep questions open. So if you try to answer the question, right, then your brain has answered it and it no longer needs to work on it, which is great for, you know, when can I get the report? Oh, in 30 minutes, right? But it's useless for questions which are much, much, much more complicated or difficult to address, or things which might even take a lifetime to try to answer. Right? You don't want your brain to answer that. You want your brain to keep on working on them. So if you combine this with this question, what can I do to, right? And you try not to answer the question, things can really shift because your brain will continuously work on things. And it means you can address difficult issues without having to force yourself and stress yourself to come up with an answer. So here you're using uncertainty, you're riding it, you're using it. And if you're like, what is Ben talking about? All right, I'm going to ask you some questions here. And I want you to resist answering them. All right? If you find yourself answering the question or trying to answer it, you're doing the exercise wrong. Just let the question sink. All right? And deliberately stop yourself answering them. Right? It's difficult for some people, right? So we're so used to be practical, come up with the answer. Yeah. Right? But this is a much more gentle way. And remember here, I'm talking about you, the living organism, all of your intelligence, not just your intellectual intelligence. Right? So I'm asking you, the whole living organism. What can you do to have a fantastic day today? What can you do to make somebody else feel special? What can you do to make an even bigger contribution to food and agricultural systems? What can you do to find new ways of being motivated in your work? What can you do to contribute towards a better world? What can you do to enjoy uncertainty? What can you do to fundamentally change the way you think. What can you do to allow yourself to gain a different perspective? And what happens when I ask these questions?
I was listening.
And what happened to you, though? How did you feel when I asked them?
It resonates. It seems like opens more than it closes.
It puts you in the space of possibilities, right?
Yeah.
All right, and it keeps you in that space, in that space of possibilities.
Yes.
All right, and this is so important in terms of uncertainty. Right? And it wasn't the specific questions that I asked which were important or not. Right? It doesn't matter what the questions were. Right? It's about keeping yourself, by not answering the questions, your brain is still work. You know, some of you go, yeah, but we've got to be practical. We've got to be practical. Right? It doesn't make sense. Right? Yes, but your brain is still working on it. You're not saying, oh, the universe is going to tell me what to do. You're asking your brain to keep on working on this. Know that your initial answer isn't enough. Keep on going. And often, I was just working with somebody, well, just very, very recently, right? Today, actually, in a coaching thing, and they were asking these questions, these open-ended questions, and they were like, I never got answers, right? But I found myself going to the gym. I found myself connecting more with my family and stuff which I've been planning to do, but somehow haven't found the motivation. And so the answer you get to these things, it's not an intellectual answer. You just find yourself doing it because you're signaling to your brain that this is important. And the response isn't a conscious response. You just end up doing it. Right? And you have to. So I really recommend that you try this, and stop asking yourself the question why, and stop putting pressure on yourself to always come up with answers, because often it's the pressure you're putting on yourself on the answers which is making you even more anxious, which is making you even more closed, which is stopping you coming up with the answers. Right? So it's a really, really, really important kind of thing, is to be able to answer this question. And it also, one of the things just before we take a break, is that with empathy, right, with people, there's two kind of types of empathy. One type of empathy is when you feel somebody else's pain, right? And this is problematic, right? Because a lot of people will do anything to avoid feeling their own pain, even if they're not aware of it. And so actually feeling a certain type of empathy can actually prevent you from acting, because it's too painful to ask that question, right? And there's research done on this with brain scans and all of this kind of thing, right? This isn't just philosophy. There's another type which is more about compassion, right? Yeah, this isn't happening to me. I'm not walking in your shoes. I'm not feeling this thing. This is happening to you. It's not happening to me. And this bothers me, right? That it's happening to you. And I don't want it to be happening to you, but it's not the same as me feeling it. Right? And you're still feeling empathy in this sense, but in a different kind of way. And what this technique of not answering the question does is it often allows you to ask questions and to face difficult topics without them making you feel crap to the point where you don't even want to think about it, right? Because you're thinking about it at a deeper level. So what can I do to, I don't know, what can I do to contribute towards ending torture in this world, right? I don't want to think about torture all the time and what, the awful stuff people can do to each other. But I can still, and so I tend to not think about it, but I can address it by asking these questions and just leaving it open. And my brain is working on it at some level. Sorry, I've gone on a lot here. And just before we take a break, does anybody have any questions or comments? Does it make sense? Are you like, no, this really doesn't land with me? It's fine if it doesn't land with you. It's okay. We're all different. Any comments? Are you lost, feeling, yeah, this makes sense, or what? Close my uncertainty, please help me.
It's landing good.
I'm
Yes.
sorry?
That it's landing very good.
Okay. At least
Yeah.
with you, Norma.
I would just jump in to say that it does make sense, what you are saying and what you are recommending. And I mean, these are not things that you just know it, they happen, they come to your brain, and it is things that one is just used to. Well, why is this happening? And wanting to have answers and responses. Why is this happening to me? Why? It's probably also part of the way that we have been brought up and instructed academically, because if you think of the scientific method, it's always asking us, the scientific method, the whole purpose of it is, well, why is this? I mean, you have a hypothesis and you have to prove it. You have to search for the evidence to prove why is this happening. And that's how the entire world, I mean, is how we have improved where we are right now. It's responding the why question and searching for more. So then, in terms of why, how this why affects us psychologically in times of uncertainty, it's you are bringing a different perspective, so that we also ask ourselves, well, when do we need to stop asking us why? And additionally, something that I do try to practice, because this is part of my previous learnings, is that to set myself limits of where I can act. If I am not able, if things are not under my sphere of influence, and I am aware that things are not under my sphere of influence, like for instance, I cannot change the war in Palestine, or I cannot change the war that is going on in Ukraine, or I mean, that's too far away, but even things in my immediate surroundings, I am not able to change that and the other, because it's not under my sphere of influence. So I really do not need to tap onto it, because it's not there. Well, I can work on expanding my sphere of influence. Yes, I can do that. But it's best to put my energy on working and trying to intervene and to change those things that are closer to that are in my sphere of influence, that are closer to my sphere of influence, or that I can influence to expand under my sphere of influence. So you've remind me of that as well, while you've been exchanging and sharing with us the ideas in the session. Thank you.
Maribel, thanks for sharing this, and it just gives me an opportunity just for the break, just to clarify one thing, right? I absolutely, I am, I'm kind of in many ways hyper rational, right? And it's the science of all this stuff which excites me, right? And I love the scientific side of things. And for me, all of this explanation, and we don't have time to go onto it, it's evolution, right? I just think evolution can do the most astonishing things and whatever. So I come at this from an entirely biological, naturalist perspective, right? Not from a kind of a general fluffy kind of approach, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these fluffy approaches, right? Everybody to their own. So I think that the why is a fundamentally good question to answer, to ask, right? I'm not saying don't ask it. I'm just saying be clear as to what the answer is you're trying to get, right? And use it within a clear framework, right? Be clear as to when you're using it. If you're asking, why do I feel bad as a person or inadequate as a person, right? Right, whatever, you're not going to get an answer, right? I mean, you might talk to a psychiatrist and you might be able to make up another narrative, but it would be just as made up as your current narrative, right? That's a different thing to asking, why do things fall down rather than float up when I drop them, right? So of course, asking the question why. But you need to be clear as to, in strategic planning processes, we have to ask why in order to come up with a theory of change, right? But we're asking it within a limited set of circumstances, right? And here we're talking about, the framing of the workshop was in terms of overwhelm in the face of uncertainty, right? And I'm saying just that it's important that we're being careful when we ask the question why and when we're not. So thank you for just giving that opportunity just to clarify this, because I don't want anybody to leave this and go, well, Ben's asking, let's never ask why. Of course we have to ask why, but we're very used to doing that. This is about trying to add another piece of another tool to our toolbox. Okay. Okay, so let's take a break here of 5 minutes, if that's okay. All right. We are running a bit behind schedule, but that's good because people have comments and questions, and that's fine. All right. But let's try and be back in 5 minutes, if that's okay. All right. See you soon. So here is just another thing. So we've got just over 40 minutes left, and I'm trying to get through 2, possibly 3 more approaches. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot there's a lot of these tools which are available, right? And we're only, because of the time is just, we've got quite a short time. We're only focusing on a few of these things, and so what I'm trying to do is just is focus on the main concepts behind these at this stage. But anyway, moving on. If you remember, a fundamental thing of this workshop is that we're saying if there's no prediction errors, right, predictions between our model of the world and the world itself, there's no possibility for change, right? This is the fundamental thing, right? Because prediction means you either update the world through acting or you learn, right? And in the absence of an error between your model and the world, right, there's certainty. And therefore, there's nothing for you to do, which is new, right? There has to be some dissonance. Now, artists call it artistic, what's it called? Not artistic, great. Artistic, what's it called? You know what I mean? Dissonance, the creativity gap or whatever. It's the same thing. It's this uncertainty. So in the absence of uncertainty, artistic tension, that's what I mean, right? So in the absence of uncertainty, there's no possibility for anything new, right? And yet our brains are trying to get rid of uncertainty. So the last exercise, in a sense, it was turning our brains against our natural process, right? But you have to be kind of in that, more relaxed frame of mind to do it. So what we're trying to do is, if we want change and ride uncertainty or surf uncertainty, in a sense, we want to create prediction errors, right? And you also need to create prediction errors if you're working with communities or governments or whatever. If you want to change any kind of behavior, whether it's your own or whether it's other people's behavior, you at some level will need to create ambiguity, prediction errors. Otherwise, there's no possibility for change. How can we do this for ourselves? We're not, this workshop's just focusing on ourselves. We're not talking about working as organizations or communities here. We can do that, but not in this workshop, right? These principles apply at a much bigger level. So how do we do it with this, with this thing? Many of you are probably familiar with this model of the exploitative, the explorative dilemma. It comes from foraging theory in biology originally, that does a squirrel exploit its existing patch or explore new patches, right, for food? Do I go to a restaurant? I've got some friends visiting. Do I go to and the exploitative means you're exploiting your existing knowledge and you know what you're going to get. But when you explore, you don't know what you're going to get. Right? So friends come to visit. Do I take them to my favorite restaurant, whereas I'm exploiting what I already know? Or do we explore somewhere new? Right? And it might be better or it might be worse, right? There's uncertainty. Right? And so there's a cost of exploring, right? There's a cost to exploring new options. It's uncertainty. But there's also a cost to exploiting what you already know. And what's that? Well, boredom is one thing. That's the little thing. Is there anything else? Or what about when the world changes externally? It's like you're going to be quite, if exploiting what you already know is fine in a stable environment where you are not changing and the world is not changing, but it's hopeless in a changing situation if you're essentially sticking to the same routines, right? It's because you've got this mismatch and you've only got the strategy of exploiting what you already know. So you really need this balance between exploitative and explorative. And this is basically uncertainty and certainty. But the certainty of exploitative is a false certainty. If there's a drought, that squirrel is going to be very sad that it hadn't explored other territories around it. Right? So exploring is a way of, in a sense, it's a way of creating future opportunities, even if you don't need them now. Right? There's fascinating papers on this as to when you have different strategies, and we all know this with exploitative and explorative with new products. When people bring them to market, the market changes and they're doing very well, then the market changes, then they're irrelevant, right? So this is the basic dilemma. So this is essentially curiosity, what we're talking about here, right? Discovering what's new and different. And this woman here, Ellen Langer, who was the first female psychology professor at Harvard, has written a lot about this. and this is a book I very much recommend you to read if you're interested in any of this, The Mindful Body. It's an awful title. It's not really about body at all. All right, it's a little part of it, and she's she's coming to the end of her professional career, and it's a little bit of a kind of looking back, anecdotes and whatever, right? But it's really excellent in terms of this maintaining and living in uncertainty, right? It's very worth reading, right? I don't agree with all of it. She can be quite controversial, but it's stimulating what she comes up with. And she's about how do we go for the new and different. So we can't always be going on holiday. We can't always be meeting new people. We can't always be going to a new restaurant. We can't always be getting this external stimuli, right? For change. So what do we do in the meantime? All right, how do we do it on a day-to-day basis where we get off autopilot and we start kind of focusing on what's different? It's surprisingly simple, and it's so simple that initially you'll probably dismiss it, but hopefully over the next week you'll find yourself doing this and going, oh my God, wow, it really makes a difference. All right. I want you to look around your room. Right? Just look around your room. And probably most of you have been in there hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, right? And I want you to look around your room and just notice things that you've never noticed before. Could be the print on a book, the color of a picture. Maybe a reflection or a piece of dirt on the wall. Doesn't matter what. Just notice something you've never really noticed or paid attention to. And then move on to something else. It doesn't have to be important. It's not about important things. It's just noticing things. And notice how you feel when you're doing that as well. You're probably starting to feel a bit kind of sort of like gently relaxed. Okay, you can come back and you do this. What happens?
I was just looking and wanting to really see in a room that I spent many years in. What I couldn't find one little thing that I had not been aware of, and I finally found one. So I was concentrated in really searching for that one thing that I
You
had
couldn't
not
find anything that you'd never been aware of.
Oh.
Take a look.
Until I did, but I was searching for it until I found it.
Look at the back of your hand. Are there any things that you've never noticed there? Really look. There's no little line or vein, or there's nothing there that you've not noticed.
Found something.
Try and find something else.
Found one more thing.
Try and find something else. And try and find something else. And try and find something else. And now look around your room and try and find something that you haven't noticed before or paid attention to. all I'm trying to say here is that there's billions and billions and billions of things out in the world, right? I mean, that when we look around, and it's not about whether it's not even about whether we're processing it or we're consciously paying attention to it and trying to say, oh, I haven't noticed this before and this is important or not. It's about even noticing the details. It's almost like an artist. You know, you're walking along with an artist. I remember walking along with an artist friend. I still don't quite get it. And walking along, and then suddenly you'll stop for 5 minutes and look at a leaf and go, look at this color of green. Look at the shade of green, right? And I'm like looking at the leaf and going, huh, it's green. And he's looking at it going, but look at that. Look at this thing. It's about noticing stuff, right, which you haven't noticed before. And it doesn't matter what you're noticing, it's the act of noticing. Because what it's doing to your brain in terms of this uncertainty is it's saying to your brain, there's information in the world out there. It's not about your model. There's new things in the world that you haven't been paying attention to, right? And what that does is at a very deep level, it makes you focus outwards rather, in other words, your brain is in the state of looking for new information. So it's in the state of saying, hey, the world has got more information beyond my model, right? It's creating prediction errors. It's looking for newness in the world. And it's not about important conceptual things. It's just the act of looking around you. And I'm sure some of you have had the experience, either you have kids or with your colleagues, where you have the same conversation over and over again. It's a different conversation, but it always has the same outcome. Anybody have that? Anybody have that, where you have you have a with the children or your parents or with colleagues, and it kind of like it's just the same conversation gets repeated again and again, where we all play our roles, right? It's because our brains are not looking for new information, right? We're just playing the role within our existing model of the world, and there's no change. And if you spend 3 or 4 minutes before you go into a meeting like that, just looking around for things you've never noticed, it can be trivial things, right? Your brain will go into a meeting or into a situation where it will look for new information in that situation. And then you might end up getting different results. And if you don't believe me and you're like, what's going on here? Try it over the next week or so. Just notice when you're walking home, you could look at your hand and there's thousands of things you don't really notice. And when you're walking home, just notice things that you've never noticed before. And it just takes you out of your model, creates uncertainty, which you can then, which then opens up this space of possibilities, which Julienne referred to previously. Right? It keeps you in that space of possibilities. Any questions or comments on that?
My comment is, when you're going out for, trying to find things to like pictures of, then this is more or less the same. You're looking actively at something that is different, that is more interesting, and then you can capture it with your camera.
Yeah.
But similar thing, and maybe that's also an exercise.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
Right. And it's right. And the point is, it's not about what you're looking at. It's just the act of looking, which is the important thing. Sorry, somebody else had a question.
Yes, I have a question. The question of why. No, my question is, indeed, why is it that these what you're inviting us to do of looking around and searching for things that we are not aware of. How does that impact in our brain the issue of handling uncertainty? How searching for possibilities that I had not seen, and actively, consciously searching for those things that I haven't seen, how would that impact my handling of uncertainty?
Okay, and what would that, again, thank you for this question. So it gives a chance to clarify something I probably should have said it in this, right? You've painted to a to something important. Is when you're looking for new things here, you're looking at it in a very gentle way, right? You're not looking around and going, what is this, in a cognitive way, in a sort of like, okay, what is this and what does this mean and what do I respond? You're looking around almost like in a sort of like meditative kind of, like, you're just noticing new things, right? You're not having to deeply engage with them. You're just looking around. Oh, there's a picture of that and it's got silver. I haven't really noticed it's silver. Oh, there's this thing here, right? And it's kind of a relaxing looking at the world. It's not this energetic, okay, here's the world. Okay, I'm seeing this. What's important here? What can I do? It's a much gentler way of looking at things, all right? And so when you look at your hand, you don't have to look at it and go, oh, okay, I can see this spot. What does it mean? You're just observing and moving on to the next thing. And what it's doing is it just at a deep level, it's like we normally run on autopilot, or very often we're just running on autopilot, according to our normal way of doing things. We're running automatically, right? And we're not really paying attention to the world around us very often, right? On this moment by moment by moment kind of basis. And what this does is it invites us to kind of like to pay attention to the stuff around us. And when we pay attention to the stuff around us, it creates a certain level of uncertainty because it's telling your brain that there's something new in the world which is interesting, right? And our brain is not automatically looking for new things in the world. Remember, it's looking for certainty, right? And so it's just a gentle way of telling your brain, look beyond your model. There's a whole world around you, right? And so it's about helping people to look outside. So in a certain way, you end up creating your own prediction errors, right? Because you're telling your brain to look outside of your model. So remember, we only see our model of the world, and you're telling your brain, hey, you don't know it all, look outside of yourself. But I think it's one of those things, Maribel, that you have to kind of like try it, right? It's not, you have to kind of like try it and explore it. And not all of the tools work for everybody, huh? Some things resonate with some people more than others, and that's completely fine as well, right? But this, of all of the tools, this is, just to say one thing, this is probably the one I use most, right? It's for me, this is kind of one of these go-to things. Any other things?
I was trying to recap what I'm learning because there's a lot. So if you allow me, then I understand that it's all about the state, most of it, the state in which we are. And so far you gave us two tools. One is switching from the why question to what can I do, so that it brings more constructive solutions, answers. And then you're inviting us to the states of trying to look at things that are new, that we don't know, to change from the model of certainty to being open. So I'm trying to get out the practical practical tips, knowledge that you're trying to convey to us. I just wanted to make sure I captured it well.
You are capturing it well, and to add two additional things, right? First of all, I think I think with the what can I do is really important, shifting to what can I do, but also this not trying to answer it. All right. I think that's the the what can I do is the that's kind of is in a sense it's kind of obvious. As soon as you think about it, you're going like, of course you go, yeah, of course, now you think about it, right? But the not answering it is you're kind of like hacking the brain's fundamental operating principle of searching for certainty and searching for answers. You're using that fundamental principle against itself in a sense, right? So I think that not answering the question is and you will find that you don't ever really get the answers. You just end up noticing you're behaving differently, right? If you ask yourself, what can I do to go to want to go to the gym? What can I do to want to go to the gym? What can I do? You're just, you'll never get an answer. You'll probably just find yourself in the gym or whatever, right? Because you're asking you, the living organism, right? The whole of you. You're not just asking your intellect. And the second thing as well is about images. I wanted to do. Is there anybody here who has very strong visual, who sees things very visually? I mean, some people really see, they're seeing pictures. Even as I'm talking, you're probably kind of like half seeing it. No? Is there anybody who does that? Alejandro does, yeah. Okay. Right. There's a lot of people who see, and my wife does, right? She sees stuff very kind of like very visual person. I'm not, and it can be great for imagination, but it can also be a handicap in terms of you see stuff everywhere, and remember the walking across the plank kind of thing. If you're seeing stuff which is not helpful, then that's that's not great. Moving on, I'm not going to get as far as I wanted, right? On this quote, I've got about another 10 possible tools we could show, but I think we're going to get to the principles, right? One more. I want to show you one more thing quite quickly, but it's a principle. It's just such an easy tool, right? Such an easy tool. Blue sky thinking. All right. There's this big thing in neuroscience and psychology as well between lantern and spotlight attention, right? Narrow focus, task oriented, broad strategic, contextual, right? And they're kind of two different systems. It's not saying one is better than the other, but we want to be able to move between one and the other, right? And in terms of uncertainty, if we're always focusing on stuff where the cause of uncertainty or whatever, remember, we end up going narrow, exploiting our stuff, whereas sometimes we want to be able to step back from the issues and go broader, right? It makes a difference to how we do it. Now, this is something based, and I am going fairly quickly here, but you can watch the recording again if you want or whatever, right? But this is quite a fundamental thing in nature, the broad and the narrow. If you see a pigeon, right, walking along, feeding, it goes like this, right? It feeds. And then what does it do? If you watch it, it goes, and then it stops and it looks around. Right, watch it. It does actually do. It's not all pigeons. I've watched a lot of pigeons to see if this is actually true. Right, I don't just. I actually record them on my phone sometimes just to check that I'm actually not that it's true here. And they stop and they look up. Why? Because they have to be both narrow and broad. They have to be aware of their context. And just as we are both internal and external certainty, and the internal and the external, so we have these two different modes of broad and narrow. All right, and it's fundamental to how we act to stuff. right? And all living animals, all living creatures, leaves have this as well, right? I mean, trees have this. Without leaves come in, they go night and day, narrow kind of thing, but they're broad seasons, etc. It's a fundamental part, and you need to have both. But generally, people are good at task-oriented things or broad things. And when I'm typing on a computer, I'm in narrow, I'm in task-oriented. At the moment, when I'm talking about this, I'm kind of fairly narrow, but I'm quite relaxed, right? And so I've got this kind of balance between broad and narrow. I'm just being aware of it at the moment. And Ian McGilchrist, he's written so much on this, right, about this broad v narrow. And actually, many of you may be familiar with the left-right brain creativity thing, right? Left analytical brain is creative. It's not really true. It's a bit of an urban myth. It's more about your left tends to be more breaking things down, narrow, task oriented, and stuff in your right tends to be more contextually processing. So you got this difference. We hear it in our language. We're all kind of intuitively familiar with it. Big picture, the tunnel vision, seeing the wood or the trees, right? Broad v narrow. It's like we're aware of this distinction, right? It's not new, but it's actually a fundamental property of how our brains work. Babies tend to be, and kids and stuff, they tend to be more broader, whereas adults they get narrower, and it's really reflected in brains, right? It's not just a philosophical thing. It's because we learn as we get older, we learn what works and what doesn't work in the world. We have jobs, we eat them, we've got to a certain age and whatever. So our brains tend to narrow down our focus, right? We get more exploitative. And you can hack into this through this very simple thing of narrow vision v peripheral vision. You want to get focused? Stare at the wall in front of you for 30 seconds or 2 minutes. It will bring you very focused. But we're not going to try that. We're going to do this. You do that, please try that at home. So I want to share this one tool, which is quite important. Right, so focusing on a point is spotlight, but narrow but the lantern is broad and contextual. Do any of you have a window near you? And hopefully it's still light. I want you just look out the window and look at the horizon. Don't move your head, just look at the horizon. Look at the sky, not at a building, but really at the sky. And keep looking at one place, as far away as possible in the sky. And you'll probably notice, just keep on looking there. You probably notice that you start kind of like feeling quite relaxed in a certain way, right? And if you or somebody who has kind of like quite a lot of inner chatter going on, it's kind of stopped. Right? This is taking you into a broad, and keep on looking as I'm doing this. I mean, they're not forcing you to if you don't need to, but as you keep on looking at it, you're going into a broader, more contextual brain waves working in your brain. And if you do this, if you're getting stressed in the face of uncertainty or whatever, and you just need a quick break from something, or maybe you're going from a very task-oriented thing to maybe a meeting where you're going to have to be more strategic, spend 2 or 3 minutes looking at the sky, and it will get you into a peripheral vision. All right? when and we spend our time, during the breaks. I'm sure some of you during the 5-minute breaks we had, put your hands up if you went and checked your phone. Of course, some of you did, right? Right? And it's we're constantly in this thing, this narrow thing, and that's where this anxiety kind of like that's the place of the anxiety. It's not in the peripheral vision. Right? And if you combine this peripheral vision with asking the questions, what can I do? And looking at new things, you are going to move yourself quite quickly from this, and uncertainty moves from this to that. Right? Remember, that's how we started off, and it's kind of becomes a way of being, not just anything else. And it's very simple kind of tools. Right? And there's many others that I wanted to show you, but we didn't have time, so I wanted to focus on the ones which are kind of this is a very important thing, but it is I just wanted to focus on these the ones where there's an underlying principle. Somebody asked yesterday for resources. Here's a few books. They'll go out in the recording, and I guess Alejandra will send out a a copy of the PowerPoints or whatever. So you're there. These are all pretty straightforward introductory things, apart from this one, which is a little bit more about AI and future of intelligence and whatever. But you'll see the links to this. And with that, this has been a very short 4-hour kind of thing, and we've come to the end. And I hope some of it resonates, some of it is useful, some of it probably doesn't resonate and is not so useful. That's okay. It's what we're all at different places and different ways or whatever, and it's all about what works for you and whether you can use some of this in your relationship to uncertainty. So, any questions, comments, suggestions? Is this something which we should do more of? Is this something which is useful, or are you kind of saying, well, it's food systems change agents, what has this got to do with working in food? All right, which is a legitimate question. All right. Any responses? Any comments? Ideas? We scratched the surface here, huh?
For me, I see value in using those tools, of course, my day-to-day life, and I really appreciated when you did the exercise with us so that we can really understand deeply how it resonates. But I see the value in introducing these exercises before meetings, workshops with clients and partners, just to put them in the right state of mind. I mean, we all do energizers, and I see those as a new and more effective type of energizer.
That's interesting, yeah. I think that's right. I think that I mean, yeah, before these events, I think is very important. It's sort of like, people go into strategic planning and workshops or whatever without without being aware of how they're shutting out possibilities and what that actually means, and actually being open to new possibilities. It's not entirely an intellectual issue. It is partly, but it's also it's a physical issue. It's like it's a bigger issue than just this. Yeah. Anything else? If no other comments, that's absolutely fine. So that's okay. And within this, just to recap, look, it's not saying this stuff about uncertainty, it's not trying to replace psychology, sociology, anthropology, right? All of these other sciences which look at human behavior, right? Or biology of non-humans. It's not trying to do this. But Friston, this whole thing about uncertainty in models, right? What it is saying, and this is very specific claim, very specific, is that this is the fundamental underlying principle. Right, the language which holds all of this stuff together, and that you can analyze pretty much anything under this principle. All right, and we all know these different disciplines. They have their own language, their own frameworks, their own whatever, and you don't know if everything's saying the same thing, different things, is it contradictory and whatever. And this approach is seen as the real underlying kind of something which cuts across all of these things, not to replace them, right? Doesn't say anything is wrong, but just as a kind of like fundamental operating principle. And if you want to understand anybody's actions and behaviors, whether it's your own, your the partners, organizations, whatever, it's always going to be a matter of what's the model they're working from, what's the information that they're taking in, right? And what's the uncertainty gap that they're trying to close, right? It really will end up being one of those things. And again, we haven't had time to go into this, explore it in detail, but as long as this just gets the general concept, that's the main idea for this workshop. And Alexandra will be, or Alejandra will be sending out a feedback form. All right. And I would really ask you to please just do take a couple of minutes to do this, and sooner rather than later, because you know how it is. If you put it off, it just goes. Because it is important to us to know whether you think this is valuable or not. Because otherwise it's just guessing, right? And we at the moment are trying to figure out whether or not to take this work forward, right? And whether this is something which needs to, longer, more going into depth, more sort of like concrete kind of thing, or if it's something where you're like, you know what, this is kind of interesting, but not really, right? We're needing to answer these questions, and only you can answer that for us. Yeah. So with that, please, it's been a pleasure working with you all, and please do feel free to email me, Ben. Ben Elers. I think it's probably in the chat. It's my email. Do feel free to email me if you have any questions, or contact me on LinkedIn, because I do care about this stuff. It's not just doing it as a sort of like doing a workshop. I personally do care about this, and I always learn from every interaction. So do feel free to ask or keep in contact. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. If there's any other things, Alexandra, do you have anything else that you need to?
No. Thank you, Ben, for your time, and thank you all for joining us. As Ben mentioned, we will have a feedback survey. It will appear automatically once this session is over. But Alejandra will send an email tomorrow as well with the link in case some of you have to run to another call or meeting at the hour and won't have the time to fill it out. We would appreciate your feedback. As Ben mentioned, we're exploring this type of content, this type of work, and having the feedback, of course, of the participants is what will actually give us insights whether, yes, we should continue doing this work in 2026. again, thank you very much for joining us. I'll mention one thing. It's not the first time. I've been several times in those workshops. So I'm usually sitting silently because some of those exercises and practices are not new to me. But I have to say that from what I've been observing is that everyone can find something for themselves. So there's definitely some practices that I use that are very useful. And I think individually, everyone can choose out of this menu of options something that will work for them. So thank you again. And yes, please also, as Alejandra wrote in the chat box, stay in touch through the Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems community for similar or other technical events that, of course, we have more on food systems and agriculture. And wishing you a great rest of your days, afternoons, evenings.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.